G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome aboard the patch 1.63 Desert Hunters dev server. Today we're going to be taking a look at the first of two videos, doing a quick overview of each of the new vehicles. Today we'll be looking at aircraft. Now, just one thing to note before we begin, not all aircraft were available at the time I was on the test server, most notably the British Hudson Mark V and the Ki-87, that is apparently part of a premium pack, and I couldn't have a look at those as a result. So, first things first, let's go in War Thunder's national order, and we'll start with the F9 F8 Cougar for the United States. Okay, so the F9 F8 Cougar. The Cougar is a rank 5 battle rating 9 US naval jet fighter and is the new NCAP for the American naval line. This aircraft has been long requested by the War Thunder community and is armed with 4 20mm AN-M3 cannons with 760 rounds of ammunition total. Stats include a 1,018 km/h top speed, a 33.7 second turn time, and a rate of climb of 3,421 feet a minute. It has very little in the way of armouring. As you can see, internal layout is pretty much what you would expect of a jet. We have fuel spars and fuel tanks in the leading edge of the wings, 2 main fuel tanks down the body, engine mounted at the rear, guns are in the front with ammunition directly in front of the pilot. The stats don't meet the historical numbers from the information that I have on this end, but we'll save that for a review once it's on a live server, because they may change just yet. But for the moment, I found that it was definitely faster and accelerated better and handled better than the Panther. Overall, its performance reminded me actually quite a lot of the MiG-15 Biz, although not quite as powerful in terms of engine and acceleration, and definitely not in rate of climb. It should be interesting to take into combat. So next up, yours for only 1,840 Golden Eagles is the BV-238V1 Premium. This 6-engine seaplane is the only aircraft that Germany receives this patch, and yes, of course, it's premium. Slightly disappointing. This is a really interesting aircraft to look at. I was actually really looking forward to flying this one. It's armed with a single 20mm MG151 with 1,400 rounds of ammunition between reloads and 4 quad MG131 MGs with 18,000 rounds or 4,500 rounds per gun. The stat card lists its top speed at 400 km/h with a surprisingly small 31.9 second turn time and a rate of climb of only 182 feet per minute. Unsurprisingly, this behemoth is almost virtually unarmoured. There is a small metal plate behind the pilot, and that is it. What was surprising was its internal layout. Everything's in the wings. Obviously the wing spars are there, but all of the fuel tanks, engines, pretty much everything to do with the aircraft's flight characteristics are mounted in the wings, with only the control cables going to the tail section in the very top and rear of the aircraft. This probably has something to do with its fairly massive bomb load, but this is going to prove rather interesting for people who tend to drop in on the tails of aircraft and shoot the center fuselage trying to shoot them down. There's virtually nothing in the main body of the aircraft to actually hit in terms of hitboxes, and it has a lot of rearward-facing firepower. In terms of its bomb capability, however, it is significant. Rank 2, battle rating 3.3, and at maximum it can carry 20 250 kilogram bombs into combat on its own. From a flight testing site, I found it surprisingly maneuverable for an aircraft of its size, and it held its speed well in a fairly significant turn. Its speed, on the other hand, was garbage, barely able to hit 400 km/h in a dive without wanting to break itself to pieces. And it could only change altitude down. It wasn't kidding when it said the climb rate was that bad going up. Next up, at rank 4, battle rating 5.3, is the Su-6 M71F. This is Russia's brand new ground attacker. Dual 37mm NS-37 cannons with 90 rounds of ammunition across them both. Dual 7.62mm Shikers machine guns with 1,500 rounds of ammunition mounted out the nose. And of course a rearward-facing turret with a 12.7mm Barazin UB machine gun with only surprisingly 196 rounds. Stat card lists this aircraft's top speed at 381 km/h with a turn time of 49.7 seconds and a rate of climb of 808 feet per minute. And honestly, that's about right. The aircraft is a bit of a pig, but it's easy to understand why when you take a look at this thing's armour layout. 64mm thick glass plates in front of the pilot and the gunner, with the entire cockpit and part of the engine bay actually wrapped in between 6 and 12mm thick steel plates. That armour doesn't just cover the gunner and the pilot, by the way, it actually covers the oil system and part of the fuel tanks, protecting this aircraft from a significant amount of fire. Honestly, in flight testing, I found this thing to be utter garbage to fly. It just felt wrong. The guns were easy enough to get on target, but it was just slow and vulnerable. It just didn't feel like a safe aircraft for this battle rating. But on the other hand, in the test flights, I wasn't getting shot at, and looking at the armour layout on this thing, that may be where its saving grace lies, the ability to absorb an absolute metric ton of damage before going down. In terms of module layout and upgrade path, again, nothing particularly interesting. We have the upgrades for the guns and the ammunition belts as you would expect. All 5 ordnance loadouts are tied into one of 3 pylon modules that you must unlock. The first one gives you access to 6 Fab 50s, the second one gives you access to 6 Fab 100s, nothing particularly impressive there. 2 Fab 250s on the third loadout. The fourth loadout is 10 RS 82mm rockets and 6 Fab 50 bombs, with the final ordnance loadout being 10 RS 132mm rockets. So it's basically an SU-2 on steroids. Yeah, flight testing in the test maps, it handles reasonably well. It doesn't turn particularly fantastically, but it's not horrible either. It is pretty stable, so it works well as a gun platform. Interestingly, the 37mm belts do get access to an air target round, although I would never like to engage this thing in air-to-air combat, if at all possible. Armoured targets will be my primary go-to on this plane if I use it, and I do think it will get used. I don't expect it's going to be particularly popular in realistic battles, but I do believe in combined arms ground forces battles it will be very, very popular as CAS aircraft, especially with its 10 rocket loadout. So next up, from the British tree, we have the Brigand B1, a plane that I'm actually really looking forward to testing out for myself. This is a rank 4 battle rating 5 aircraft, 4 20mm Hispano Mark 5s with 800 rounds of ammunition, 552 kilometers an hour as standard on the stat cards, 27.6 second turn time with 1,766 feet a minute rate of climb. So, armour. This aircraft has 1 armour plate in the front of the aircraft, it has 1 behind the pilot and 1 at the back of the cockpit. Nothing major, but it might be enough to help in a head-on situation. All the fuel is housed in the wings, the guns are mounted almost directly below the pilot at the bottom of the aircraft, which is not uncommon among the British designs. The fuselage itself, other than the cabling for the flight control surfaces, is rather empty, as you can see. Engines are obviously exactly where you would think the engines are. Upgrades for flight performance, survivability and guns are pretty much standard as you would expect, and yes, the aircraft comes stock with the same crappy 20mm default belt as every other British aircraft, so do yourself a favour, get the belts unlocked as quickly as possible so you can get access to some decent ammunition for your guns. 3 pylons to unlock all the ordnance. You must unlock the Tier 2 pylon to get access to the Tier 4. Ordnance options are 2 500-pound bombs, 2 1,000-pound bombs, 16 RP3 rockets, or 16 RP3 rockets and 2 500-pounds together in conjunction. In terms of flight performance, this aircraft flies pretty much like what it looks like, a cross between a Beaufighter and a Mosquito. This aircraft did feel particularly powerful when I brought it out for my test flights. I was really impressed by its handling, I was really impressed by its turn time, I was really impressed by its speed overall. It was a really nice plane to fly, and I think it's going to be a very good heavy fighter. In conjunction with that, the ground ordnance options on this aircraft are not bad either. I can see this being used as a very effective CAS aircraft in ground forces battles. Now, these last 2 aircraft, unfortunately, I wasn't able to flight test before the server closed. However, we still can take a look at the stats of these aircraft. First up, we have the J1N1 Mod 11. Rank 1, battle rating 1.7, 120mm Type 99 Mark II cannon with 60 rounds of ammunition in the nose, with 2 additional 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns with 1,200 rounds of ammunition between them, also mounted up the front end. The rear turret, however, is what makes this aircraft interesting. It's a 7.7mm Type 97 machine gun, quad-barreled with 3,000 rounds of ammunition. Or at least that's what the stat card says, but as you can see, looking directly out the rear of the aircraft, it is actually 2 turrets with 2 7.7s that seem to operate as one singular unit. While I've never been particularly fond of Japanese heavy fighters, especially the low-tier ones, they've never really done a lot for me. This one in particular is one that I wouldn't want to sit on the tail of for an extended period of time. Now, as the X-ray cam shows, we have 2 gunners sitting inside the aircraft. I'm not entirely sure if you shoot one, if the other one takes over, or how that exactly works. Outside of the gunners, the pilot, the guns, and their associated ammunition, the fuselage itself of the aircraft is pretty much empty. All the fuel is stored in the wings, along with, as you would expect, the oil and cooling systems for the engines. If the stat card of the aircraft proves to be true, this could be a very, very powerful aircraft. 499 kilometers an hour with a 26.3 second turn time. 986 feet a minute climb rate is not actually all that bad at 1.7 battle rating. But it is definitely a heavy fighter and not a bomber. Its only ordnance is two 60-kilogram bombs that it can carry into battle. However, it does have a full selection of Japanese ammunition for all of its weapons, so it's pretty well appointed that way. In hindsight, I'm actually rather disappointed I didn't get a chance to fly this one. I would have been very interested to see exactly how those turrets work in a firing environment rather than just in the hangar. It was, unfortunately, time that caught up with me on this one. And last but not least, the last aircraft that was available on the test server, and again, I didn't get to fly this one out. I missed out on both the Japanese aircraft, unfortunately. This is the Rank 4, battle rating 4.7, P1Y1 Model 11. This is a interesting aircraft. At first look, it looks much like the Japanese heavy fighters. However, this has more in common with the Japanese bomber. It's armed with two 20mm Type 99 Mark I cannons, both in turrets, with 450 rounds of ammunition, 518 kilometers an hour, 27.2 second turn time, and an 835 feet a minute climb rate. As you can see from those stats, it is clearly based on the Japanese heavy fighter base chassis. Armour-wise, it has a 7mm plate behind the pilot, and that is it. Nothing particularly interesting about its X-ray layout. Again, all the fuel's in the wings. The fuselage is kept clear for either two 250-kilogram bombs, one Type 91 Mod 2 torpedo, two 500-kilo bombs, or an 800-kilo bomb. And these all become accessible after unlocking the 3 pylons that are available to unlock. You do need to unlock the Tier 1 pylon in order to get access to the Tier 3, and then the Tier 3 to get access to the Tier 4. Only armoured target and air target ammunition available on the aircraft for the turrets, but that should be more than sufficient. Other than that, without flight testing, I can't tell you much else about this aircraft, other than it looks like a fairly decent high-speed strike bomber. And with the 20mm cannon mounted in the nose on a turret mount with virtually unlimited ammunition, I can see people racking up quite a lot of ground kills in this if they're quick with the mouse aim and manual control of the turrets. Anyways, ladies and gents, that brings this video to a close. Unfortunately, I didn't get to record all of the flight testing that I did, as I was on a fairly tight schedule. I only found out about the dev server being available a couple of hours before it was due to close, and between getting everything on the aircraft and everything on all the tanks from the hangar, and then quickly trying to punch through all of the flight testing to get a feel for each aircraft, I just didn't have time to actually start recording everything as well. If the dev server comes up one more time, I will come back and revisit the aircraft, this time with just flight and flight testing. I will also revisit those last two Japanese aircraft that I never actually got to test because the server closed before I could complete. Anyways, I will leave you with the F9 F8 Cougar coming in for a carrier landing. This was the first time attempting it. It's really easy to put this thing down, although honestly I wouldn't expect anything less. As always, this is on realistic controls, so I will just let this one roll through. And until next time, click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more. Fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.